You're listening to the AAF Analyzed podcast with your hosts, Derek Heid and Garrett Lay.
Hello and welcome back. You are listening to AAF Analyzed Week 1 Recap. I'm Derek Heid, as always alongside me, Garrett Lay. Before we get started though, don't forget that if you're listening on Soundcloud, to like and give us a follow. If you're on YouTube, to like and subscribe and leave us a comment on our Apple podcast too. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at AAF Analyzed to keep up with the latest news and episode release announcements.
Of course, our t-shirt giveaway is still going on all week, so make sure to go check out the Twitter for info on how to enter, and the winner will be announced this Saturday before the first game. So trust me, why would you want to miss out on a free t-shirt? That doesn't even make sense. Or hat. It's totally up to you. So you just tell us what you want if you win, and you're going to get it for free. We'll ship it right to your house. It will be awesome. So, yeah, make sure to go check out the Twitter for info on that.
Yep, so, you got a little under a week for that.
Oh, yeah. So we're going to go ahead, and before we get started on the individual game recaps, we're going to go ahead and keep track of how well we do picking games throughout the entire year. So it'll be Derek and I head-to-head. Unfortunately, this week, Derek went 3-1. He only missed the Iron game, and that was one where right before the podcast, right before we started recording, he was like, I think I'm going to change my pick. So he could have gone 4-0, but he's an idiot.
I could have.
And didn't go with his gut.
Idiot is a bit mean there, but, I still beat you.
Whatever. Okay, anyway, I went 2-2. I missed both the Apollos and the Hot Shots, which are pretty glaring misses, actually, considering the relative domination of both those teams. But, hey, we're learning. I'm learning.
So
Derek also has to learn.
Derek has mastered the game picking.
Yeah, whatever.
This will be the only miss of the season, I promise you.
It was a really fun weekend, though. I pretty much was able to watch all the games. It was super fun, I thought. So we're going to go ahead and give our comments on the first weekend of AAF football, first weekend ever.
Yeah, the league, really successful launch, and I don't know about you, but I had a lot of fun watching all the games. I thought that
it was quality football.
Yeah, it was really enjoyable because I really liked the idea that these guys, they had nothing to lose, so it was just football in its purest form, I would say.
Yeah, those guys were flying around the field. I mean, you did see a decent amount of injuries, which kind of sucked. But I know it was a short training camp. A lot of these guys haven't played full-paced football
in a while,
in a long time. So that really accounts for it. There were a lot of cramps in the Stallions and Hot Shots game. The Stallions are playing in much cooler weather than coming down to the Hot Shots. So that probably had something to do with it as well. But I'm sure as the season goes on, we'll see less and less injuries. The pace is also super fast. These games were lasting 2 hours and 30 minutes, which was just really awesome
or
for
shorter.
the fans. Yeah, the timing was great. So they really held their claim that they were going to have shorter games in the NFL, and that was certainly true. I felt like I barely watched any commercials while I was watching that. It was just I was watching football, and that was it.
About really the whole shorter game thing, the whole shortened play clock that they had, I mean, I feel like it's too short because there were a whole lot of delay of games in those games.
Yeah, the Hot Shots were flying to the line, though, too. We'll talk about that when we get into the game recap, but they were getting to the line it was in 10 seconds, and then 15 seconds later they were snapping the ball. The Stallions barely had any time to get ready on defense. But that's definitely going to probably play a huge factor in how teams play this game.
Mm-hmm. A little bit of a recap from each game. If you didn't notice, every single home team won last week.
That was interesting.
Which was something I didn't really catch on until the last game between the Hot Shots and the Stallions, but maybe home field advantage is a big deal in the AAF, and we just haven't noticed yet.
It might be. I mean, I would argue that all four of the teams who won were the better teams anyway.
Yeah.
Maybe not as expected, me and the Legends, but they were definitely the better teams overall. The better teams played at home this week, so that could play into it as well. So we'll have to see going into week 2 how home field advantage plays out. But it was really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Couple of logistical things. The app, I absolutely fell in love with. I think it's really awesome.
The app is fun. I had a good time with it. I did have to delete and re-download it to get my play prediction stuff to work.
Okay.
which was a little frustrating. I don't know. I didn't see much on Twitter about anyone else having like problems with that. So I don't know if it was just me being an idiot. But
Very possible.
anyway, once it started to work, it was really cool being able to pick the plays. I got a couple right, like the full play, pass to the right, first down.
Yeah.
And that's a cool feeling. That's fun. It was fun to play along. So
Yeah, just the whole aspect of watching like the players move in real time and seeing the whole field, it was like mesmerizing.
yeah.
I was like eating dinner and I was like watching the pregame like on my phone, and I was just like, it was just warm-ups, but it was just so cool to watch that.
Yeah, it's a really cool feature.
A couple things during the recordings of the games. Another one of the things with the app real quick that I noticed was the whole picking the play is ahead of the TV,
Yeah.
because obviously live games are on a tape delay. Just, I don't know, I wasn't a huge fan of that because I want to be able to like pick the play and then watch it on my screen instead, like my TV instead of my phone. But I don't really know how they would be able to put that on a tape delay,
Yeah,
so to speak.
I don't know if there's anything they can do about that. They might be able to put the app on a little delay as well. And I'm
that's
sure, depending on your connection strength, I bet your app is probably sometimes behind anyway.
That's true.
So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that all works out. But speaking of like the broadcast and things like that, I know there were a couple technical difficulties. I know some sound during the Stallions Hot Shots game. It just like cut out completely for a little while. But that's just the league and the broadcasts working together and figuring that out. I'm sure it's probably going to go off without a hitch this week too, as they figure out what the heck's going on. A lot of these broadcasting teams were brand new and had never really worked together before. So I'm sure that had to do something with it as well. Plus, they have, you have written down here, they have microphones in like all of the players' helmets.
Not all of them. I think it's like quarterbacks, but yeah.
So that's like a lot of microphones for them to keep track of. Which, if you didn't notice, you would definitely catch some bad words being said on live TV, which I think is just awesome because you really get to hear the players when they're playing.
Yeah, CBS was on top of things, and every time it said, they were cutting the audio like out completely, and there were just multiple times where it was just, there was nothing there.
Yeah, it adds a really cool aspect to the game, but those sound engineers have to be on their toes.
Absolutely. A couple other things. They do player interviews during the game. I'm not really a big fan of that because it's kind of like you're not focused anymore.
Yeah, it was a little messy, and I'm sure they'll figure out where to put those as the weeks progress.
The main thing was the average attendance was up over 20,000.
I thought that was
league-wide
spectacular.
average. And on TV, they had more viewers on CBS than ABC did for the NBA Saturday night.
2.9 million people ended up watching the AAF on Saturday night, which was just, I'm sure that was well higher than Charlie and Bill ever could have predicted for their opening weekend. Didn't you say like the AAF Instagram gained 100,000 followers in like one day?
Saturday, it got nearly 100,000 followers. It was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it was awesome. And you were talking about attendance numbers. San Antonio blew up. They had over 27,000 people. So San Antonio, obviously Texas, hungry for football. That was awesome there. Orlando had over 20,000 people show up. Great numbers once again. Birmingham, a little smaller of a city, but still 17,000 people. And then Arizona, once again, a little smaller football culture, but still having 15,000 people show up to the game. Those are just excellent numbers all around. And I'm sure the low ticket prices and the fan engagement stuff all really helped. But I think the AAF, they're looking good after that first weekend.
Yeah, definitely very excited for what's to come. And let's go deeper into each of these individual games and kind of break them down a little bit for everyone and kind of get some big stories out there to look out for.
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and start off with the first game of the Saturday night games, San Diego versus San Antonio. San Antonio won that game 15-6. It was a low-scoring game, but I do think that this game offered us a glance at what's going to be really important during the early stages of the AAF as teams start to figure out what the heck's going on or whatever. First of all, for me, I noticed if you have a bad O-line, good luck. Because Berkovici was absolutely slaughtered in the backfield. The Commanders ended the game with 5 recorded sacks and 4 quarterback hits, but if you watched any of the game, you saw the O-line get absolutely dominated. Now, that could be a testament as well to the Commanders' defensive line and their skills there, but that offensive line was cheese. No matter who was under center, it was just not good for the Fleet. Philip Nelson was put in the fourth quarter after Bercovici threw his second pick, but it was much too late, and the Commanders were just harassing whoever was under center. So if you don't have a good O-line, these quarterbacks need their time to be able to throw the ball. A lot of these guys are still pretty inexperienced. So without a nice O-line to block or get the run game going, you're kind of screwed. For the Commanders, being able to finish in the red zone is going to be huge as well, with touchdowns now being normally, if you can get the 2-point conversion in, worth 8 points instead of just 7. That's actually played a huge role in like when you're kicking field goals and when you should go for it on fourth down. But if the Commanders had been able to finish in the red zone, it probably would have turned into a runaway game. Nick Rose kicked a 29-yard field goal on 4th and 11, 23-yarder on 4th and 4, a 28-yarder on 4th and 1. So they kept getting stopped. They had 2 short fourth downs in the red zone, and all of those field goals were under 30 yards. So imagine if those all turned into touchdowns, even without 2-point conversions. It would have been a much wider margin for the Commanders to win. The Fleet defense didn't have the same pressure on the quarterback the Commanders had, but they still made some strong plays in the secondary and came away with 2 picks. So I do think the Fleet are going to get it together here coming into week 2. Neither team didn't really have a very strong performer at quarterback. Bercovici obviously wasn't great, but you could chalk part of that up to the offensive line. We saw it during the preseason game as well when he had his 5 fumbles. And Logan Woodside for the Commanders only had 50% completion and 2 picks and no touchdowns. But San Antonio doesn't have to worry about who their quarterback's throwing to because they have a great receiver in that Mikhail McKay, who I talked about in the preview episode. He was making all sorts of tough catches and had 5 receptions on 80 yards. And then just my 5th point for this game, big plays can really make or break a team. This was like a theme throughout all of the games this weekend. The only TD of the game for the Commanders came after a 46-yard catch and run. So it seems like teams are maybe struggling a little bit marching down the field just as they settle into playing football again. So right now the big plays are really what could really make or break a team.
Yeah, one of the main things I noticed was the ability to convert, especially like finisher drives with touchdowns instead of field goals. We were talking during the games, and I said that the Commanders were struggling to finish their drives, and it just so happened that they were able to finish one, and that proved to be enough to get them over the Fleet. But if you want to compete with the likes of Arizona and Orlando, you're going to have to finish.
Oh, you're going to have to finish for sure. I'm sure people will start to finish more often as they get more work in on the field because this was way different than practice or even the preseason games. This was full-paced football. Guys were flying around the field. People were getting hit hard. As we know, that's my first story, of course. Speaking of a hard hit, that hit on Bercovici that everyone and their mother has seen when he got absolutely eviscerated by Sean Washington off the edge. Steve Spurrier, during their press conference today, actually talked about how that probably should have been a flag because he ended up seeing the hit. He's the coach for the Apollos, of course, but after he said it probably should have been a flag, but I honestly think the fact that they let it go was great for the AAF because so many people noticed and so many people got excited that wasn't a flag after seeing a quarterback get his head taken off, and I think that really helped with the viewership.
Yeah, that really put the league on notice for me. 3 minutes into the game, that happened on CBS for the 3 million people watching. And it's just
got absolutely smacked. It was excellent. It was so good.
People were like, that's just incredible. Maybe spring football isn't bad.
I know. People that's the kind of excitement people want to see out of the AAF. People just hitting as hard as they can, and it was awesome.
A bit of a side note, though, from whenever I was watching that game, Bercovici lost his helmet like 3 or 4 times total.
He was getting lit up. I think he probably wasn't wearing a chin strap.
He did have a chin strap on.
Did he?
Just needs to
was it just popping off?
Yeah.
That was getting ridiculous.
Just flying everywhere.
I was surprised his actual head didn't come off a couple times.
He was always getting right back up and into the next play.
I couldn't believe how resilient some of these quarterbacks were because they were getting hit, and they were getting hit hard. But speaking of quarterbacks again, as you said during the preview episode for the week, and you wouldn't let me hear the end of it, that you called that Berkovici would get pulled, and he did. You were so excited about that.
It's even better that you were the one that got to say it instead of me. Just warms my heart.
I know. Isn't it excellent? Just excellent for me to tell you that you're right.
I love it.
Anyway, so Philip Nelson.
Same time next week?
Yeah, same time next week, buddy.
All right.
I'll be talking about how right you were again.
I can't wait.
But anyway, Philip Nelson, he came in during the fourth quarter. He played okay. He threw a pick as well. So like I said, that offensive line is kind of getting destroyed. There's a lot of pressure on the quarterback. He's going to be the starter for week 2, Nelson is. So it'll be interesting to see how he plays.
Mm-hmm. That the Commanders' defense, you're not too high on them, but I really liked him in that game.
I like the Commanders' defense a lot more than I like their offense.
That's
I
true.
think their defense is probably going to end up carrying them.
That front seven was constantly in Berkovici's face. They had 5 sacks in the first half. The massive hit, of course, by Washington. They had 10 sacks in that preseason game, and they really kept that going into week 1.
Yeah, that was something both you and I got right. We both said that would happen. The Commanders' defense would have a great day. And they did. They held the Fleet to just 244 passing yards and had those 3 picks. The quarterback was constantly under pressure, so their defense was excellent.
And finally, the last thing I really want to point out, Mikhail McKay, my goodness, is he good.
He was disgusting.
He put on a show. Some of these catches he was making with the defender all over him. Garrett, you had him as your power player.
Yes, I did.
It was a good time. My guy also, he wasn't McKay, but Dontez Ford still had a good game. But McKay was targeted 12 total times. However, shaky passes only allowed him to get 5 catches, but he still ended up with 80 yards and some pretty incredible catches.
Yeah, some of those catches, he was catching them over people. He was having to come back for the ball hard, and he was making great plays on the football. When you look at the box score, you do see that he only had 5 catches 12 times, but you see that a lot among all the receivers, and it is you can be chalked up to quarterback play. I mean, I have seen some drops that probably shouldn't have been dropped, but that game was also just they're getting warmed up. This is once again their first time in actual game situations, but Mikhail definitely looked like he was the most ready to play full, fast-paced football.
Definitely.
Making those catches. So we're going to go ahead and close out each recap with a game MVP. My MVP for this game was Sean Washington, who decapitated Berkovici. He ended up with 2 tackles, a tackle for a loss, 2 sacks, 2 quarterback hits, and a forced fumble after blowing up Berkovici. And I think what made him my MVP really was just the fact that he brought attention to the AAF. He probably was the AAF's week MVP, despite, being maybe an illegal hit, but who cares? It was awesome. So,
Yep, my game MVP's got to be Mikhail McKay. I really think that he bailed out Logan Woodside in a lot of big times for San Antonio, and if it wasn't for McKay, I don't know if San Antonio would have won this game, because McKay he threatened them over top, and that really spread out the Fleet defense. And if it wasn't for McKay, that game would have been a lot more spread out for the Commanders, and quite frankly, I could see the Fleet kind of capitalizing on that.
Yeah. All right, so that is game number 1. Now game number 2. It was at the same time. We're going to be talking about Atlanta versus Orlando.
Yep, at the Bounce House, the Apollos did show just how deadly they are, while the Legends left themselves in Atlanta, and they need to recoup.
Yeah.
Despite the very lopsided score, though, the Apollos did win 40-6. This game was actually 3-0 Atlanta halfway into the second quarter. And at the beginning, I was keeping notes on my phone. I thought Garrett Gilbert, the Apollos starting quarterback, was the one that didn't look very good. But however, after Younghoe Koo scored the first 3 points,
Younghoe Koo.
I don't know. The broadcasters were saying Younghoe.
I'm pretty sure on the depth chart he's listed as Younghoe Koo. I don't know though.
Yeah, but I think it's pronounced Younghoe.
Really?
I
think. That's crazy.
Yes.
Okay,
At least that's how they said it on NFL Network.
Sorry, Koo.
He scored
if you're listening.
He scored the first 3 points in AAF history, and after that, the game was all Apollos. The Apollos
Yes.
would score 3 touchdowns to close out the first half. They'd lead the game at halftime by 2 scores. And before halftime, Apollo's starting quarterback Garrett Gilbert had passed for a touchdown, handed off a touchdown, and caught a touchdown on a trick play where Jalen Marshall, the wide receiver, Jalen Marshall, threw a touchdown pass to him. And Jalen Marshall, the wide receiver, already has more passing touchdowns than some QBs in games. Kovkov Berkovici, Hackenberg,
Woodside.
Woodside.
Yeah, I think that was another play, just like the hit, that really opened up the AAF to like everyone in the football community there, because that was another one. People love what originally was dubbed the Philly Special. People love seeing that, and it was a good catch. It was a great throw, good catch, well run, and I think that's another play that really put the AAF on the map this weekend.
Yep, the second half was more of the same for the Apollos. They put in the backups, got 2 more touchdowns, and they won 40-6 in a blowout win for Steve Spurrier's squad. Garrett Gilbert had an impressive game, 15-25 for 227 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2-point conversions, or 2 2-point conversions. Akeem Hunt had 10 carries for 73 yards, and Apollos linebacker Terrence Garvin, 10 tackles, 2 picks, and 1 touchdown.
He was playing like he was ready to sign an NFL contract that game.
Great day at the office for a linebacker.
Oh, yeah.
A couple of big things that I noticed were Atlanta's coaching. Kevin Coyle, I was giving you the benefit of the doubt as being the replacement coach for Atlanta, but there were a lot of calls that I just didn't understand. The main one, at the end of the second quarter, the Legends were on their own 49-yard line with about 30 seconds left in the half, and the Legends went for it on 4th down, and they didn't convert, so the Apollos already had the ball with 3 timeouts in their opponent's territory.
Yeah, I wasn't really sure what Atlanta was doing sometimes. Since Childress left, they kind of seem to be in disarray, particularly on the Childress. They seem to really be in disarray on the coaching end. And I do think they have a quality team, but I think they just have to do some serious soul-searching after that week 1. I know it's super early. Just like a lot of these statements we're making here, they're pretty broad. It's early in football. I mean, the NFL was a mess the first 3 weeks. The Buccaneers were 3-0, so no one knew what the heck was going on.
Fitzmagic looked like the MVP.
Yeah, he looked like he was going to beat out Mahomes for the MVP. And, like, things are crazy the first couple weeks of football. And this is even crazier because it's the first ever time these guys are playing in, like, full football games. So who knows, but the Legends coaching did not look very hot.
Yep, the Apollos would capitalize with their 3rd touchdown of the quarter in that specific instance. And the Legends also ran a ton of screen plays. And the Apollos caught on quickly. That led to 3 interceptions and the pick 6 in the 4th quarter that really just sealed the deal for them.
I saw very few screenplays work during any of these games, and I think that might have to do with the only allowing 5 people to rush rule. Which,
so
if
there's
we want to take a
always people in
second,
coverage.
Yeah, if you want to take a second and talk about our thoughts on that rule, because that was something that it was really new, and we didn't talk about it in our preview episode, so I want to just take a second and talk about that rule.
So basically the rule for the AAF is you're only allowed to rush 5 players at one time. This wasn't really heavily talked about in the media until it actually happened.
Yeah.
I learned about it about 2 or 3 days before Saturday. And
The games.
yeah, and I just thought it was a really strange rule, and it catches your defensive coordinator off guard because you can't all-out blitz at any time. There's always enough linemen to block your blitzers.
Now, I understand why it's in there, and I think it's because the offensive lines just didn't have enough time to become a unit and really know what's going on, which you saw with all these sacks in some of these games. So I understand why it's there, but I think the penalty is way too harsh. It's 15 yards and an automatic first down, which is just insane for your only foul being rushing too many people. I saw plenty of times in the Stallions and Hotshots game where the Stallions were given an opportunity to score by this call because they got another 15 yards on top of getting the first down. So if it was up to me, I'd probably change it to either a 5-yard penalty or literally just replay the down.
Or like a loss of down. Or no, it wouldn't be a loss of down because it's on the defense.
Yeah, like the offense just gets to replay the down with the defense actually playing how they're supposed to. Because I just think 15 yards, that's a lot.
Yeah, I have a little side note about that Hotshot Stallions game. There were 3 penalties called against the Hotshots for illegal defense, and on all 3 of those drives, Salt Lake scored a touchdown.
Yeah, like that shouldn't happen for something where all you're doing is just rushing an extra guy on accident. Who knows how it happens? These coaches aren't calling these plays on purpose to rush them. It's just kind of inexperienced guys who aren't used to this rule at all. Because even if they played in the NFL or on practice squads, this is not a rule. You can rush as many people as you want. So, it doesn't really make sense to me for that to be such a severe penalty. So I think that is probably something that they should look at going into this next week or at least later into the season.
Yep. This did happen to both the Apollos and the Legends, not with as many consequences as it did for the Hotshots. But it was a thing that happened, and I'm sure that they weren't very happy about it. Another big thing from that Atlanta Apollos game, the Atlanta quarterback, Matt Sims, just stud. He struggled. Just about the entire AAF world, including ourselves, expected Aaron Murray to start at quarterback, but they just 2 days before the game, they were like, we're going to start Matt Sims. Surprise. And it wasn't the right call. Sims would look really shaky the entire game, constantly missed his targets. He finished 15 of 28 for 126 yards and 2 picks. So
I don't know if some people, if you saw it, but he got creamed too on a hit. Like he let go of the ball and he got absolutely lit up. I couldn't believe he got up from it. But he was taking some big hits back there, too. It was not helping his performance.
Kevin Coyle did see that Sims was struggling, though, and he pulled him halfway through the fourth quarter to get Aaron Murray some reps. And Aaron Murray was able to drive the team into the red zone, but he threw the game-sealing interception in the end zone.
Boy.
But I don't know. I think Aaron Murray looked better than Sims in that game. I know it was one drive, but I think Murray should start for him next week.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. We'll know by the time our Friday episode comes out for the week preview who's going to be starting there. But the quarterback situation in Atlanta does not look as good as I thought it was going to at the beginning of the year.
It's very true. Game MVP for me, Garrett Gilbert. In the season preview, I did say that I needed some validation to have Gilbert as one of those top quarterbacks in the league, and I think I got that validation on Saturday. Spurrier trusts Gilbert with the offense. He allows him to do everything from letting loose and sling the ball downfield to catching touchdown passes. So I had a lot of fun watching Garrett Gilbert this week, and I'm pretty excited to watch him going forward.
That Spurrier-Gilbert connection is super important because during the broadcast, the announcers were talking about how finicky Spurrier is known to be with his quarterbacks, and if you don't play well, you're going to get sat. So the fact that he played that whole game and played as well as he was is really a testament to the connection that Spurrier and Gilbert have, and I think that's going to make them super dangerous because right now Spurrier is looking to be one of the premier coaches in the AAF, and I think he's going to take the Apollos far. My game MVP is going to be that linebacker, Terrence Garvin. 2 picks, a touchdown, 10-plus tackles, and a sack. Like I said, he was playing like he wants to get into the NFL. He was making big hits, big plays, reading the quarterback, and he just had an excellent game overall.
Yep. And with that, we're going to continue on to Sunday afternoon, Memphis versus Birmingham. Probably, in my opinion, the worst game of the bunch. Not because the teams were bad. I mean, Memphis wasn't very good. But it just wasn't very fun to watch a 26-0 blowout. The Iron did win 26-0 in slaughter. That's the only word I can use to explain this.
I feel like that game was the epitome of the Iron's name. It was Iron football. That's what it was.
Yep, the first half didn't appear to be heavily skewed to either side, as neither team was really able to get any sort of major momentum going. Nick Novak was the first half MVP, scored all 9 of the Irons' points before halftime. However, in the first half, Christian Hackenberg was just absolutely terrible. He was missing throws in every which way he could.
We are Penn State.
Hackenberg only completed 3 passes going into halftime, which led Mike Singletary to be scared to pass the ball to start the second half. The Express would run the ball a total of 26 times, and a lot of strange packages like the Wildcat, multiple fullback dives, and much more.
Yeah, go ahead.
The Express would eventually bench Hackenberg, but his backup threw a pick on his second pass of the game.
I was going to say the Express did run the ball a lot, and if one highlight does come out of this game, besides the Express defense playing relatively well in that first half, Zach Stacy actually looked super solid back there. He averaged, I think it was like 4.6 or 4.9 yards per carry, which is excellent, and he seems like a strong runner. So look for him to be a big part of their offense going into this next week.
Yep. The Express even had their chances. The Iron gave up fumbles on back-to-back drives on their own side of the field, and believe it or not, the Express came away with 0 points.
That's not great.
The Express tried to convert a 4th and 2 call with a fullback dive that was absolutely stuffed, and the other drive ended with a missed field goal.
Which was, how many missed field goals were there this week? Was that just one?
I think there were 2.
No, there were 2. There was one in the Hot Shots game too. But overall, I was impressed with the kicking.
I was as well.
Yeah.
The Express did have their chances to come back, but bad play calling, bad quarterback play, and the Express were just terrible. They had under 105 yards in both passing and receiving. The only thing I can praise was Zach Stacy at 58 yards. He had a good average.
Yeah, I hate to say it, the Express did not look good.
No.
You hate to say that about any team, particularly in this young league here, but they really have some work to do. Them and the Legends are really looking like they have some, they got to look at what's going on in these organizations. I know it's only 1 week, and things can change pretty quickly. I know the Express get a chance to play at home this upcoming week, so who knows, that home field advantage might really help. But yeah.
Yep. For the Iron, Luis Perez had a fantastic game.
Hey.
He really impressed me. I'd say he's number 2 quarterback in the league at the moment with his ability to read the field, throw balls in tight windows. He ended up with 252 yards and a 2-point conversion. Trent Richardson also silenced me for trying to tell people to pass on him with a 2-touchdown performance.
This is where I was able to feel good about my predictions. I did say that Perez would be solid, and I thought that whoever started at running back for the Iron, which I did think was going to be Richardson, would be solid, and he was solid as well. So it made me happy to see that Perez and Richardson were really succeeding there.
Yep, biggest story of this game, Luis Perez. I had friends texting me from all over saying that Perez looked really good, and Hackenberg obviously did not, but Perez was reading the field really well. He had really tight spirals and did really tight windows. He was hitting receivers that I thought were covered from the start of the play, and the only knock on him would be that he never had a touchdown in this game.
Yeah, that did hurt.
But he completed 57.5% of his passes, 252 yards, and a 2-point conversion. So I was impressed.
Yeah, it was impressive. I thought the Iron receivers were pretty good. Of course, Quentin Patton had 107 yards and had a nice 42-yard catch. He was 4 receptions on 9 targets. Other than that, Perez was really good at distributing the ball, throwing it around the field. He had, 7 receivers with at least a reception, and 8 with targets. So he was really doing a good job of finding the open man and delivering nice balls.
Yeah, I really liked him. He had a great game. Another thing that you brought up that I really liked from watching the Express Iron game, Quentin Patton's a force, and if he is available in your fantasy league, pick him up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's nice.
The Iron run game, Trent Richardson's probably not a free agent in your league, but he's fantastic. 58 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had 23 carries, which I think was the most in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to get to the bad side of this game, let's just vent about the Express play calling. I mentioned this in that game recap, but Mike Singletary, what are you doing? This is just what I saw. He ran at least 5 plays out of the Wildcat formation that resulted in maybe 5 yards. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, he's a great player, great linebacker, and their one linebacker had 10, I can't remember his name, but he had 10 tackles and 2 forced fumbles. So the linebacker core was good, and the defense was solid, but the offensive play calling, he's going to need some help.
DeMarcus Gates would be that linebacker.
Yeah.
He had a very solid game.
Mm-hmm.
But back to the coaching. He gave 5 to 10 carries to his fullbacks. I'm sorry, Mike Singletary, but this really isn't the 1970s. The plays rarely resulted in anything over 2 yards. One play was stuffed on a pivotal 4th and 2 that would have brought the Express into the game. And the one successful trick play they ran resulted in a touchdown. Oh, but yeah, 2 guys were moving at one time, and it got called back.
Yeah, they're going to need some discipline on those, particularly if you're going to be throwing out trick plays, because these guys are already trying to get used to playing football again, and then you're throwing in trick plays, which is why I was so impressed with the Apollos completing their Orlando special.
Yeah, they had
it was a trick play.
Yeah, Spurrier really coached those guys well. Singletary, I'll give you another week to kind of recoup, because that game was
Yeah,
brutal.
You got to give it to him. That's his first game calling as a head coach.
In a while.
Yeah.
He was a Niners head coach.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, that's true. So, game MVPs for me, I'm going to give a kicker some love here. The kickers overall had a really great week, but I think Nick Novak was excellent. He ended up going 4 for 4. He managed to keep the Iron ahead of the Express in that first half when no one could really get anything going, scoring their first 9 points. And he ended up with 12 points, 4 for 4, with a 47-yard long field goal, which was just awesome. So I want to give the kicker some love here.
Yep, Trent Richardson went from my fantasy pass to game MVP, matter of 46 hours. I apologize to anybody who listened to me, because make no mistake, this offense runs through Richardson. 23 carries was the most in the league, and this could mean huge things for the Irons offense coming forward.
Yeah, like I said, I thought that Alabama offensive line would create some nice holes and do some good blocking. They did do that. You got Richardson with the 23 carries and 2 touchdowns. Perez only got sacked once. He was hit a couple times, but I thought the offensive line held up really well.
Yep.
And the last game, which I think was probably the most exciting to watch, this last game. You said it during the game preview episode. We thought it was going to be the most exciting game, and it was.
I thought it would be.
Yeah, you did. I had an inkling. Arizona won 38-22. They really look like the most complete teams at this point in the season, it's super early. But Salt Lake, of course, lost their quarterback. I'll talk about that in a second. But both teams, they look solid. The Stallions did put up a good fight against an Arizona team who is looking really, really excellent.
Mm-hmm.
So the game took a little while to get going, and nobody scored, I think, until the second quarter. But as soon as the Hotshots scored, the Stallions responded by putting together a solid drive and returning fire with a touchdown of their own. And I thought this was going to end up being a game that came down to the wire after watching those 2 drives, because they both looked really excellent. The Stallions then had a strong defensive stand, but then they muffed the punt return, and that's kind of when things went downhill. The Hotshots took advantage and scored on an absolute beauty of a pass from John Wolford. It was to Rashad Ross, who had an excellent game, speaking of good players. And the Hotshots ended up with a 3-point lead going into halftime, leading 19-16. The Stallions were definitely still in the game, though, but then unfortunately Josh Woodrum went down in the third quarter with a hamstring injury. I don't know if it was cramps or if he just pulled it, but like I had said earlier, the weather kind of played in with the heat. The Stallions coming down from being in the colder weather up in Utah. So he was having a solid game up into that point, little over 100 yards passing with a touchdown and a pick, and then Matt Linehan had to come in and take over. This is where things, like I said, went kind of downhill. The Stallions' D really started to look gassed going into the third, and the Hotshots started to run away with it after that Woodrum injury. Wolford was balling out. He looks really, really strong. He threw touchdowns to Ross and Jarrell Presley, and the defense came up with a second pick. The Hotshots secondary, like I said, they were really strong. They only allowed a little over 160 passing yards this game, and they had 2 picks. They were really flying to the ball when it was in the air. They have such great experience in the secondary that they played really, really strong. Stallions kept fighting, though, and Linehan did show some flashes of being pretty solid. They scored a touchdown, but failed on the 2-point conversion early in the fourth, and it was 22-35. The Hotshots kept pouring it on with a solid offensive drive to put up 3, and they took up a ton of time on the clock. But really, this was one of the closest games I saw all weekend, particularly for that first half, showing off the real potential in this league. And it probably would have been closer if Woodrum hadn't gone down and had been able to do more with the offense. But Linehan, as you've put on our document here, sorry if I missed. Linehan.
Yes.
Anyway, he did show some flashes, and I think he could be good, but the Stallions are in trouble if Woodrum can't return for this next week. Some stories about this. The Hotshots play the song Shots by Party Rock Anthem after a touchdown and 2-point conversion, which is just excellent. Whoever's in charge of that is a smart man or woman, because they know what the heck they're doing. It was fabulous when I first heard it. I was super excited. I was like, they know how to have a good time in Arizona.
Yeah, they have a great time. But how about Wolford and Ross?
It was disgusting.
This combo, they ended with 103 yards, 2 touchdowns on only 5 catches, and Ross was on fire.
He was burning defensive backs, and then he got wide open on a route and snagged a great one-handed catch that was thrown behind him by Wolford. And that was one of the most impressive plays of the weekend I saw. He had to turn his body, snag it one-handed with his right hand, and bring it down, and it was just an excellent catch.
What about that back shoulder touchdown pass to the left corner?
That was also
I liked
really
that
nice.
one. That was a fantastic pass by John Wolford, and an even better catch by Ross.
Yeah, and the one really deep touchdown, I think it was a 53-yard touchdown to Ross from Wolford, came after that muff punt. So they definitely aren't afraid to throw it deep and make a big play to change the game.
Yeah, both of these guys are probably available in your league because Knight was expected to start, and not many people knew about Ross. So pick them up. And that offense, that Hotshots offense was incredible. Other than Wolford and Ross, how about Jarrell Presley? Presley had 94 all-purpose yards, a touchdown, and 2 two-point conversions.
Yeah, they were playing out of their minds. 275 yards and 4 touchdowns from Wolford, going 18 of 29, was by far the best quarterback performance of the week, hands down.
Yeah, he also had 4 two-point conversions. He ran 2 in and threw the other 2, both to Jarrell Presley.
That's what I was impressed with a lot. He is not afraid to tuck and run the ball either. He's got some wheels on him, too. I saw him scramble for a couple first downs or whatever. He looks solid.
Yeah, he had really good stats in that preseason game, and my, oh my, did he transfer that to week 1.
Yeah.
Another big thing, that Woodrum injury. If, as you said, if he's out for multiple games, the Stallions are in trouble because they look really good in the first half, keeping it 19-16. But after the second half, they weren't the same with Linehan.
And I think you can chalk some of that up to the defense. The defense really started to look gassed. A couple guys went down with cramps, so that might improve with conditioning. Their run game does look solid, though. What's the running back you were talking about last? I can't remember how they pronounce his name. Buanyan, yeah.
We call him Buagnan, but it's Buanyan.
Buanyan. He looked solid. Asiata was good at punching in touchdowns when they're in the red zone. So the run game looks really good, but they are going to struggle a little bit if they don't have Woodrum back for a little while.
Last but certainly not least, Linehan. I said he didn't really play too well, other than the one pass that he completed while he was falling over. I wasn't that impressed. And that Hotshots defense, you called it in the preseason game. I'll give it to you. They were good. That secondary was really hot.
They were hot shots out there. So, game MVP, no surprise. Now, it was kind of close between Ross and Wolford, but I had to give it to Wolford.
We
you
both
gave
have
it to
Wolford.
Wolford because without Wolford, Ross would not have had the game he had. So you got to give it to the quarterback here. But that Hotshots offense looks pretty much like the most complete offense in the league right now.
Yeah, 275 yards, 4 touchdowns, 4 two-point conversions. There was no one like him in the AAF this week.
No.
He's officially been put on notice. The NFL scouts at those games were certainly watching, and I am over the moon with how good he was.
Yeah, he's absolutely the number 1 quarterback going into this next week. He looks just excellent. Yeah, we can't stress this enough. And I think the offense that he has around him is one of the best as well, so he should continue to trend up.
Yep. And with that being the last game, we're going to shift into some quick things before the end. We're going to do a Where We Were Right and a Where We Were Wrong segment at the very end.
Wrong.
I'll start. So, Where We Were Right. I did correctly pick 3 of the 4 games. I only missed the Iron. Just as I predicted, Berkovici was shaky at best against the Commanders, and he didn't even last the whole game. And the Commanders' defense put on a show against the Fleet.
Yes, they did. We both called that. What did I get right? I got Luis Perez. He looked solid. Iron O-line stepped up there. Richardson was strong fantasy play. He was, and my power player ended up turning out really well with McKay. I was super proud of myself for that one. So where we were wrong, we were very, very wrong about some of the quarterback situations. That does have a little bit to do with us recording early on Wednesday, but we got Murray wrong, we got Knight wrong, and we got Dustin Vaughn wrong. But you know what? At the end of the day, what does it matter? The quarterbacks who played, we saw some good things, particularly starting Wolford over Knight looks like a genius move. Now, Knight might be solid too, and the Hotshots might be really dangerous if they have 2 great quarterbacks. And we might end up seeing Knight go to another team by the time the season's over. But Murray and Sims, we don't really know what's going to happen there. But Vaughn, do you have anything to say about Vaughn?
Vaughn, he didn't look. I think he got a couple of snaps in that game, but he definitely wasn't terrible. In our preseason episode, I recall distinctly saying that I thought the top 3 quarterbacks in the league were Knight, Murray, and Vaughn, and none of them were starters week 1. So I would like to apologize and say that the top 3 quarterbacks now are Garrett Gilbert, Luis Perez, and John Wolford.
Yeah, I would
and
say.
I'll stick to it.
Yeah, how would you rank those if we want to go throw a quick quarterback ranking here? I'd probably go Wolford, Gilbert, and Perez.
That's how I would agree there.
Just because Perez is really solid, but he didn't throw a touchdown, and I think the offenses of the Hotshots and the Apollos are going to complement their quarterback's play better than the Iron's run-based offense is going to complement Perez's play, but the Iron really don't have to worry about quarterback right now.
Yep, and I was also wrong with Trent Richardson. Again, if you passed on him, I'm deeply sorry to you. But I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, speaking of talking about our preseason rankings, mine are looking like doo-doo. I had the Legends winning it all, and that is not looking too hot. The only pick I'm really proud of is the Iron, who actually seem like they're pretty solid there. So I am happy with that. But I had the Hotshots lower than it seems like they belong. The Apollos lower than where it seems they belong. The Stallions looked okay, and I think they can really put together something special. But I'm not sure about my preseason rankings right now. Could surprise everybody, but I don't know about that.
Yep. And finally, real quickly, we're going to do each recap. We're going to do power rankings.
Mm-hmm.
They're pretty obvious at the moment. And coming at number 8, we have the Express. They scored 0 points, self-explanatory. Yeah. Number 7, we had the Legends. Matt Sims just didn't look good. They only scored 6 points. Not that great.
No.
Number 6, we have the Fleet. The Fleet did keep it close with the Commanders throughout most of that game. So we have them above the other ones, and that's why they're in 6th. But tied for 4th, we have the Commanders and the Stallions. The Commanders did win.
Yeah. This we couldn't really agree on that much. I had the Stallions over the Commanders, which is kind of weird because they are 1-0. But I just wasn't that impressed with the Commanders' offense, not being able to finish against that Fleet defense. But, Derek, you made a good point. Their defense looks really solid. And, of course, they did come away with the win, so it's kind of hard to rank them below a team that's 0-1 with a possible question at quarterback here. So I do agree. I think they're going to be tied for 4th, and we'll see who kind of blows up this next week.
Number 3, we have Birmingham. Pleasant surprise there with the 26-0 shutout. Number 2, we have the Apollos. They were just really well coached all around, 40 points. But we weren't that impressed with the Legends at all, so we didn't put them higher than number 1, the Hotshots. Wolford, 4 touchdowns. Ross was incredible. Terrell Presley was incredible. That defense was incredible. Just a no-brainer to have the Hotshots top of the list.
The coaching for the Hotshots looks excellent. The pace that they were playing was great, and that's one of the reasons the Stallions were so gassed. And they come in at number 1 because I do think they beat the best team out of the teams that lost. I think the Stallions were probably the best team of the losers this week. So there you have it, folks. Our first ever week recap. Week 1 has been recapped. How exciting is that? We're going to be moving on to week 2. It's super exciting stuff. We're going to have some great matchups coming your way that we will talk all about on Friday. We'll catch you back here, like I said, Friday morning or afternoonish, depending on when we can record. I have 2 big exams coming up, so I am going to be a busy bee. But don't forget to check out the Twitter for when that release is going to be happening. And thank you for listening. Peace out and play football.
Thank you for listening to the AAF Analyzed podcast. Follow the show on Twitter at AAF Analyzed and feel free to contact the show to have your questions featured on a future episode. And don't forget to check out the show on all other platforms such as iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube.